But first, we have to talk about the college football news of the day, and this has really taken a lot of the conversation around Instagram and Twitter. You guys have been a part of it on YouTube as well. The Pac-12 has been at the center of a lot of conversation. And I've talked a lot about it on previous podcasts. Trey, you weren't on that last Pac-12 pod. So as we start today with the first news item, the Pac-12 down to either Apple TV or ESPN for their media rights deal. I'd love for you to make a little bit of sense of all this.
It's a really interesting situation. And for a quote unquote Power Five conference to be having to scrape the doldrums of a media rights deal, they're not going to be in. Look, obviously, ESPN, Apple TV Plus could be, the way of the future. I think that could be a really interesting option for the Pac 12 if the price is right. But ESPN's obviously not a bottom of the barrel content distributor, but you guys talked about it last week. They are not getting the A crews. They are not getting the A talent. They're not even getting the A technology from ESPN. It's an afterthought with
Yeah.
ESPN. And so like even if they are able to scrum up a deal with, the 4-letter network and with the mouse, are you happy with that as a Pac-12 fan based on the product that you've gotten? I don't think so. And you're certainly
Mhm.
not going to be compensated in the way that these other Power Five conferences are. And you're going to be lagging behind as a result of that. So I don't know, man. It's going to be fascinating to watch. It's really crazy to think that such an established historic lead, the Conference of Champions, if you believe certain announcers that might like to dabble in some stuff while they're announcing. But it's really crazy to think that they could be on the ropes. I really don't think that that's an exaggeration. It's going to go one
Mhm.
of two ways. They're either going to be a trendsetter in getting their media rights on a streaming platform that fans can pay for a la carte. That could go really, really well for them as we get more and more cord cutters, more and more generations of people that aren't interested in buying a whole cable package just to watch their team play. Could go really well for them. I'm not going to rule out that possibility, but it could also be the ultimate downfall of the conference. So it's going to be really interesting to see which direction that goes.
Yeah,
Yeah, and to
Garrett,
the people that we had on Twitter that were thinking we were a little crazy for pointing this stuff out, that's just a shout out to you guys. I mean, look, like what Trey is saying, they might get a deal with ESPN, but it's kind of a bad deal. It's not like, what you were saying, it's not like they've been loving the product on the field recently. So, is this going to help them keep up? It's certainly going to help them keep up. And, it's all the rumors and the whispers in the corners of the internet about how there might be a merger and there might be what about them and the Big 12? Can they find a way to make it work? There's no reason for them to get together with the Big 12, or there's no reason for the Big 12 to get together with them. And so they're not going to keep up. And that's kind of what we talked about a lot last week, Mitch, was where we were talking, who's going
Mhm.
to end up on top of this. There's kind of 4 spots for 5 conferences. Not a good week for the Pac 12.
Well, and there's so many different angles here. I think first, just from the business perspective, Trey, you just talked about it. It's Apple TV, ESPN Plus, or ESPN could be ESPN Plus, a la Big 12. But CBS, Turner, Amazon, and Fox have all publicly said we are not doing this. We are not going to have a media rights deal with the Pac-12. CBS and Turner, I think, were the only true ones that were bidding for a full suite of broadcast rights. Amazon and Fox both wanted kind of a la carte selections. Amazon only wanted select windows per week, a Thursday night slot, a primetime Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening slot. And when the Pac 12 said, no, you don't get to pick and choose, we want a full deal, Amazon said, all right, well, we'll take our money elsewhere. For Fox, Fox said, okay, we would really only like the primetime slots as well, but you want to rope us into Saturday morning when nobody's watching, they're watching the Big Ten, they're watching the SEC, whatever, but we want to buy pennies on the dollar. And the Pac 12 cannot afford to do that right now. Garrett and I talked about it last week. Their current media rights distribution is only at $21 million per school. That is dead last compared to every other Power Five conference, where even the Big 12, who was recently in that arena, has now jumped up into the low to mid 30s per school. And then you throw in the money that's going to be redistributed from Texas and Oklahoma, and et cetera, et cetera. So from a business perspective, the Pac-12 is really up against the wall. And Garrett, you mentioned we had some people in our mentions that were trying to call us out. At one point, we got called clickbaiters because of my take on, hey, SMU fans, do you tell me why you really want into the Pac-12? And that wasn't a take on my end. I was genuinely curious. As an SMU fan, you see what's going on. Tell me, with all of that, why you still want into the Pac-12. And we had fans, of course, that got that message and said, hey, we want into the Pac-12 for X, Y, and Z reasons. But for those that said either one, the Pac-12 is completely healthy as is. There's no worry about the conference. There's no cause for pause. There's no reason to hit the alarm bells. It's fine. We'll add a couple of schools. We'll be great. Nobody's going to splinter off. Are you kidding me? Nobody's going anywhere. It's the Conference of Champions. And to that, I say, open your eyes. Like, you can say that culture and tradition matter, but at the end of the day, here in 2023, it's the almighty dollar. That's the only thing that matters. And so for Oregon and Washington and the Four Corners schools, Colorado, the Arizona schools, Utah, all of these schools are being rumored to be picking up the phone and having conversations, at the very least internally, about finding a new conference to go be a part of. Because when they start to see the writing on the wall, when they start, it doesn't matter if they come out and in a quote unquote unified statement declare, oh no, we believe in the health of the Pac-12 and we are committed to progress.
It
I don't
wasn't
believe
strongly worded either. That was not the most strongly
No.
worded
no,
statement they could have put
no,
out.
that was that truly, to me, someone tagged me in it and said, see, we're fine. Everything's great. To me, that read is, crap, guys, do you see what they're writing about us on the internet? We should probably say something about this. And didn't really feel like they even put out the fire there. So for those of you that listen to the podcast, or maybe you don't listen, maybe you just interact with us on Twitter, I would just say, take all available information in. I'm not pushing a narrative. We're not pushing a narrative on this podcast that the Pac-12 is headed for the doldrums. We're not anti-Pac-12. We've been very happy with a lot of the production that we've seen from these schools. We're going to be talking about a couple of Pac-12 schools today, and stock up, stock down, about why you should be excited for them in 2023. But at the end of the day, when you look at what all is going around and seeing, hey, the dollars are flowing away from this conference, our common sense, my experience in this industry says the Pac-12 needs to be on high alert here.
Well, and it's a historic conference, right? It's definitely lots of teams that have lots of history and all that, but you don't want to be the guy standing there saying, like the captain of the Titanic saying only God can sink the Pac-12 conference, right? You don't want to be that guy, right? Because that's where it leads you to not take the actions necessary to avoid situations that could end up tanking your whole conference. And we don't root for that. We're not sitting there cheering on, hey, hit the iceberg, right? Don't acquire anybody, no media deals, right? We're not sitting there cheering on that. But at the same time, like, you do have to take some actions. You have to start thinking about what you can do to make your product better. And, if it means bringing teams on like SMU and San Diego State, like we talked about last week, Mitch, then yeah, like that makes a lot of sense for the Pac-12. But again, for SMU, does that make the most sense? You're in a fine conference, not Power Five, but if you're looking at the new playoff, the way that that's going to be structured and everything else, like, you could probably get some auto bids out of that situation, just being a really good dominant team in a G5 conference. I mean, do we have any doubt that Tulane would have been left out this year? I don't think so. I think Tulane would have made the playoff this year.
Sure.
And so I think that you have to look at that and say, with so many things changing, you can't just say that, yeah, it's good enough to be in the Pac-12 because it's Power 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the Pac-12 media rights have been a joke for going on a decade now, ever since they launched that failure of a Pac-12 network that no one can get. Like,
Yep.
it's a bad problem. Larry Scott, this is going to be his legacy, possibly, is killing a historic conference because of just his incompetence and arrogance, thinking that his brand of the Pac-12 would carry nationally when he needed to get creative and he needed to find solutions. They're trying to get creative now with these deals with Apple and exploring Amazon, exploring all these streaming platforms. That's creative and that's thinking outside the box, but it's probably, at least in my opinion, probably going to be too little too late.
Yeah, that's certainly what it feels like. And, Klyavkov versus Brett Yormark both came in at relatively the same time. Yormark was proactive. Klyavkov was not. We can talk about that. We have talked about that. We can continue to discuss that on further pods as we get more news. But yeah, I think all of us are really rooting for the Pac-12 to figure this out. We're all pro Pac-12 expansion, right? I would love to see SMU and UNLV in the conference, mostly just because it'd be a new look for them. I don't know how much of a life raft those two schools would provide over the next 2, 3, 4 years, especially considering that the Pac-12 is down to days and months left to get a media rights deal that then determines the future of this conference. So anyway, watch this space. We'll keep covering it. But yeah, mostly just wanted to reemphasize we are not anti Pac-12. We want this to work, but the Pac-12's mess has to be covered, right? I mean, just has to be spoken of in real time.
Right.
Gracious